All right, so my name is Grant Beam, and my intervention system that I'll be talking about in this presentation is social stories. Now, social stories is something that a couple times throughout our program we've explored a little bit or talked about, but it's not something that I know a whole lot about. I'm kind of intrigued. I was intrigued by the idea of it starting out because I didn't know much about it, and so um, my goal with studying this and researching it was to just learn more about it to see if it's something that I could use in my classroom. And my goal today is to kind of teach you a little bit about it and show you some practical ways that you could implement it or potentially implement it in your classroom. So with that, we will get started learning about social stories. So a little bit of the background on social stories. We have the history here. It was created in 1990 by a woman named Carol Gray, an educator, and she was working in an elementary school with students on the autism spectrum. And her the kind of the catalyst for her creating social stories was inspired by a conversation she had with a student named Eric. And this student was very outgoing, very vocal, and he had a tendency to interrupt during class. Teachers would be asking questions, and he would just blurt out answers, or any thought that came to his head, he would just blurt out the answer, interrupt class, and kind of disturb the concentration of other students in class. It was usually very on task. It wasn't like he was making side conversations. He was very engaged, but he was distracting to other students. And so one event that really spurred this was during a school assembly. The speaker was at the front of the auditorium talking, and Eric would continue to blurt out answers and respond to what the speaker was saying throughout the assembly. And so Carol was not able to attend the assembly, but it was being recorded, so she was able to watch what Eric was doing afterwards. And what she saw was um, the speaker asking questions and Eric blurting out the answers. And so this was distracting to everybody else in the auditorium. So what she decided to do was sit down with Eric, and all she wanted him to do was write down exactly what he saw happening on the recording. And she was going to do the same thing. And then they were going to compare notes afterwards. So Eric wrote down what he saw, and he said all he saw was him responding to the questions asked by the presenter. In his mind and his interpretation, he was simply doing what he had been taught to do, which was to answer questions and respond to the person talking. Carol saw 500 other students in the auditorium, which Eric did not process or did not think about. And so that got Carol thinking that the way she was perceiving the event was Eric interrupting. The way Eric perceived the event was he was simply being polite and being engaged by responding to what the speaker was saying. And so a light bulb went off in her head that maybe she needed to create some sort of intervention to allow both her as the teacher and Eric as the student to get on the same page for what was appropriate behavior. And so this is kind of what inspired her to create social stories. So, what is a social story? And first, before we go into the specifics, a couple vocabulary terms that I'll talk about. If you see the term author, that simply refers to the person who creates the social story, who writes the social story. In most cases, in a school setting, that's going to be a teacher. The audience is going to be the person for whom the social story is written. In most cases, that's going to be a student. And so, from Special Learning Inc., a great website where I got some resources, social stories are individualized short stories that depict a social situation that a child affected by autism may encounter. Um, so, again, notice it says children affected by autism. Generally,